So the short version is we are here to get you unstuck, no matter what place it is in your life where you think this is never going to change. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing that can ever alter this or the way I feel about it or what is happening. That is our happy place. So we are very excited to have you let us know what that is. But for today, this has been up for so many people. Today we are doing quiet burnout. So the entry to quiet burnout is, and this is one of the things that is apparently most Googled for 2026 so far.
Wow.
Right? So the feeling is you're doing everything right. You're showing up. You're hitting your deadlines. You're getting food on the table. You're texting people back. You're keeping it together. You are adulting very well. And yet you know that something is very wrong and you don't know what it is. You're not sobbing in the parking lot. You haven't chosen to quit your life and move to Bangladesh, which is probably lovely this time of year. But inside you feel like the lights are just slowly going down. So today is about quiet burnout, and chances are, because of how prevalent this is out there, chances are, if you are listening to this, either you are living this or somebody you love is living this. So I'm a little tempted to just start with questions because I sent out a couple of emails asking people about this, and I literally have 20 questions.
I love it.
So, question? Shall we start with a question?
I think we shall.
Okay.
That was the I love it part. And the jazz hands.
Jazz hands. You've got the jazz hands. Okay, question number one. I keep telling people I'm fine, and honestly, I think I believe it, but I'm also crying in the car on the way home almost every day. Is that burnout, or am I just being too dramatic?
Definitely burnout.
There you go, folks. You heard it here. Would you care to say more words?
I certainly can. More words is usually never a problem for me.
Until the radio shows off, then it's one word.
That's right.
Arr.
Grunting.
Arr.
I've found in my own personal work, in growth and life, and as reflected in my professional work with people, that one of the things that stands out as the kind of linchpin to accurately assess whether someone is legitimately burnt out or not is to discuss the difference between being tired and being exhausted.
Nice.
And again, like with anything that we offer, we're not saying that our definitions or the way we're approaching things are the be all and the end all. But what we are saying is that as we apply those concepts and the definitions and treat them as if they are accurate and true, the results start to speak for themselves. So with that, most people are very confused about what it is to be tired and why they're tired, and what it is to be exhausted and why they're exhausted. And that understanding and some definition around that is really key to getting some practical insight around how to handle that feeling of burnout, right? Where we're just on the edge of overwhelm all the time. It's taking us more and more energy to pull it together and to just keep surviving what it is that we're being asked to do. And then as we do that, it just gets harder and harder and harder and harder to do because we are getting more and more exhausted from that pretense. So that would be the opening answer to that first question. Happy to go into more detail. Don't know if you want to add anything before I do. Jazz hands.
Is it useful to mention a few of the signs of what quiet burnout is compared to?
That's why I was checking with you.
There you go.
Yep.
So some of the most important things so that you can have a checklist wherever you are to go, oh crap, that is me. A lot of people, it's the difference between the outside and the inside. People look at you and say, you've got it all together. I wish I was like you. And inside you're going, that's nice. And not true. A lot of people think it's about hating your job or your work or your family or your life. It is actually the opposite. People who are passionate and really love their jobs, their family, their friends are the ones who tend to overgive and then get burnt out because in their mind they're going, but I love this. I couldn't possibly burn out. Um, it's more about emotional numbness, not emotional breakdown. So a lot of people will describe going through the motions. They don't feel satisfied when they succeed. They're not sad, but they're not happy. They're more flat. They're more disconnected. A lot of people will describe it as watching their life rather than living it. And that's a really key part. Another part is really small things start to feel like they deserve really big reactions. So whether it's the person who honks and you lose it at them, or your kid says they don't want the dinner you made because they actually hate it and you burst into tears. Um, and that idea of that in a Chinese medicine world is again about the stuckness. Oh, by the way, I'm a TCM practitioner, so that's going to influence how I talk about things. Lots of numbing strategies, and that's part of where 2026 is. People are getting the numbing strategies, so they're doing scrolling all the time. They're doing extra coffee to wake up. They're doing overworking to feel useful. They're doing anything they can to numb how they feel rather than actually feel it. And the last one is you stop really noticing yourself. It's, a week that passes, it's a month that passes, and you start wondering if you actually accomplished anything and if there is any meaning to your life at all, or if you can just go sit on a hill somewhere and stare for the next 6 months. That is my list.
Good list.
Thank you. Back to you
Very good.
with the weather.
Uh, yeah, all those things are really, again, I'm learning something every time I listen to you, are really, really, really accurate in terms of, I think, the elements that put people in that conundrum of feeling like they're absolutely burnt out, all their circuits are fried,
Mm.
and yet the things that they have to do and the responsibilities that they have to handle just seem to keep going. They feel endless. The to-do list never gets shorter, it just gets longer. And we really can get into a dwindling spiral of overwhelm and discouragement and then just apathy. So that numbness is really, really, really the ultimate expression of a coping strategy.
Mm.
And hopefully, in discerning and defining the difference between being tired and being exhausted in a practical way that people can think of in a practical manner to apply, we can start to reverse that dwindling spiral by first learning how to halt it, right? And that sometimes feels so overwhelming too. It's like, this momentum is going in this direction that's got me exhausted, and I just can't stop it. Never mind actually reverse it or handle it and get it going in the other direction, but actually even just to stop it feels really, really overwhelming. And again, feeds to that numbness, that feeling of just becoming an observer in your own life, not a participant,
Mm.
and the apathy that fuels all of that. So simply put, in practical terms, when we're working with in the clinic or in seminar or other groups, uh, we get tired from expending energy, right? So it's like, hey, we just like fuel in a vehicle, like we gas up the tank, right? We then drive around with that fuel as it gives us the power to move, and then as we accomplish that movement, we're expending that energy, right? At some point, the idea that a gas tank is full, and then if you drive the car, it's going to become empty, feels really logical to people because that's kind of a very easily discernible and provable thing, right? Can't make the car go if there's no gas in it. Put gas in it, the car goes. That's expending energy. Okay? Exhaustion comes from holding back energy, right? Not actually using energy to do something purposeful and productive, but actually denying that the energy is there and has value and will help you get things accomplished, but judging that energy as somehow unproductive and not useful. So, in other words, that's why we hold it back. And if you think about something simple like the visual of, is it easier to push a heavy cart up a hill, or is it easier to hold a heavy cart at the top of the hill and hang on to it so that it doesn't fall down? Right? Which one's going to make you tired? Which one's going to make you exhausted? And if you just think about that physical example for a sec, yeah, you might get really tired pushing a cartwheel or a wheelbarrow full of firewood up to the top of a hill.
That's very specific.
Oh, trying to be very specific
I like it. Please keep
with
going.
examples that are practical. Pushing that wheelbarrow up to the top of the hill with the purpose in mind of getting to the top of the hill, unloading that wood, and starting a fire, right? That might make you tired, right? But if you're standing at the top of the hill, you've got that wheelbarrow full of firewood, you're holding on to it, trying to hold it back from naturally rolling down the hill. That's an example of and a way to picture getting exhausted, right? What's the determining factor there? It's purpose. So we often more easily feel like expending energy is easier to do with a purpose. Like we can connect to something that feels tangible, that feels like it's worth the risk of putting the energy forward because we're trying to accomplish a particular goal, right? It has a beginning, it has a middle, it has an end. You're at the bottom of the hill, you push the wheelbarrow up halfway up the hill, you get kind of tired, you stop, you take a break, you look around, you go, man, I'm almost halfway there. I can start that fire and get warm and make food. So you get new energy and new inspiration to keep pushing that thing up the hill because there's a purpose that feels tangible to you. You get there, you unload it, you take a rest, you start the fire. Standing at the top of the hill, holding the wheelbarrow from rolling down, not using the wood in the wheelbarrow to create a fire, but just holding it, very quickly starts to feel pointless, very quickly starts to feel purposeless because you know that you can't let the wheelbarrow go. And if you do, it's just going to roll down the hill and you're going to have to go gather it back up and push it back up the hill anyway. But you also know that you can't let go of the wheelbarrow and stop long enough to take the wood out faster than the rest of the wood's going to roll down the hill. It feels pointless. It feels purposeless, uh, uh, and feels like you are expending a whole bunch of energy not to accomplish something of value, but to avoid something that you feel like and judge as disastrous, right? If you hold that energy, use all that energy to hold the wheelbarrow up, it's so all consuming and takes all of your might to do it. And the only thing you can hang on to and say to yourself is, well, I got to hold this so I don't lose the wheelbarrow in the wood. And then I've got no chance of starting the fire. Then it'd be way too tired to go down the hill, put it all back in and push it back up. It quickly loses its point. It quickly loses its purpose. And part of that is because it feels indefinite, right? You know, you can only hold the wheelbarrow for as long as you can. And at some point, you're not going to be able to hold it anymore. And then the disaster that you were trying to avoid happens anyway. And that difference, hopefully in a physicalized, practical way, is part of the reason why it's so important when we're addressing burnout to make sure that we know the difference between what feels like an expenditure of energy that's going to make us tired but has a purpose, and what feels like a pointless effort that takes a whole bunch of energy to actually hold back any energy that we could use to really accomplish something.
Okay, I'm going to agree with you, but then I'm going to disagree with you.
That's so normally.
I make your life interesting, as I believe what you're saying.
Didn't say the contrary.
So I'm thinking of that study they did a while ago where they took people on a hike and they divided the group into two, and half of the group was told that they were going on a whatever 1 kilometer hike, and even though it was actually a 2 kilometer hike, and the other group was told they were going for a short hike. And the group that went on the what they thought was a 1 kilometer hike, but then every time they said, oh, how much further is it? They'd say, oh, half a kilometer, because we're about halfway. That group said, isn't that amazing? It actually didn't even feel like 1 kilometer. It felt like half a kilometer. It felt so short because they knew that what the end was. They knew there was an end coming. The other group that they were just told, oh, it's not too much further, not too much further, not too much further. When they said, how long did it feel? They were like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 kilometers. because this ties back into you that your there's no purpose, there's no end.
Mhm.
So science agrees with you.
Yay.
The question I have though is then how would you tie that into the people who like so I'm looking at some of these questions
Mm.
and some of them like one of them the woman wrote me back and said, Colleen, I'm a mom with 3 kids and I haven't worked outside the house in years. So this doesn't really apply to me because burnout is a work thing, right?
Mm. Yeah, that's a false truth that people get defeated by all the time.
Well, and when you're talking about no end,
Mm.
there's gonna be laundry to do and there's gonna be dinners to decide on and there's gonna
Mm.
be it just keeps going, right?
Mm.
But then on the flip side, when we look at this idea of quiet burnout as people who are really passionate about what they do,
Mm.
how do you tie that in, sir?
The common denominator is holding back the truthful energy of your present time experience. So you can be doing anything that you're doing, expending lots and lots of energy, feeling purposeful. But the minute that you start to deny and not listen to what are one of the things that we say repeatedly all the time? The most important thing that a human being can do is pay attention to how they feel. As soon as we start building a momentum of denying our own feeling about any experience that we're in, because of obligation, because of a sense of duty, because of a really important purpose, we start setting ourselves up for the momentum of exhaustion to uh, take hold. Right. So it's important to be able to give yourself permission to acknowledge that even if you are doing something really purposeful and that's full of a reflection of your own values, like taking care of your kids, it's still okay for you to give yourself permission to acknowledge the fact that sometimes you're getting more tired than you are feeling energized, that you're getting bored, that you are getting sad, scared, resentful, or feeling anxious. Right? Because as soon as we do that, we're giving ourselves a chance to emotionally, metaphorically breathe. Just like if we were expending energy doing something, realizing that we were getting more and more tired, and then suddenly acknowledged that we were holding our breath the whole time because maybe we were feeling judged or worried about how we looked while we were doing it. Keep holding your breath, you're going to pass out, right? Keep holding your breath, you're going to keep depriving yourself of the opportunity to replenish and renew. That's the thing that also allows us to recognize whether we're tired or exhausted and whether we are burnt out or not. We can expend all kinds of energy in directions that feel purposeful, valuable, that maybe sometimes don't feel that way. But if we accept the information that we're getting from our present time experience in that expenditure, well, we get a chance to stop and literally renew that energy. We get to rest, we get to breathe in, we get to get some fluids, we get to uh, recheck our purpose, like check the map. Are we going in the right direction? All of those kinds of things. But what we're taught to do is ignore the signals of our own intuition and our own sensibility, right? And just keep going. Just
Mm.
keep going. There's especially in the Western world, and proud member of having grown up and lived in it, but one of the foibles that we run into in the Western world all the time is that we exalt endless effort, and we there's a lot of valor in, well, just keep going, ignore what's going on, push through it, just get it done,
Hustle culture, grind.
right? And that puts us in a position where we are setting ourselves up for really what burnout is made of, which is a momentum of exhaustion, right? We just get to that point where we've gone so far beyond our reasonable capacity by depriving ourselves, not so much by expending the energy, but depriving ourselves of the things we need while we're expending the energy. We could, get that down simply to rest, sleep, liquids, and food, right? In a very physicalized way, those are the things that make us feel exhausted. It's not so much the expenditure of the energy, it's the denial of the signals that we're getting. In other words, we're holding back our signals to ourselves that we need one of those four staples, right? Food, water, rest, or sleep. That metaphorically expands into all kinds of troublesome areas when we then, collapse into sleep or needing food or water and air. We shame ourselves. We hit ourselves with all kinds of judgment. We only replenish to then get back to pursuing whatever goal that we feel like we're supposed to be connected to in a way that's only going to make us more exhausted. We never actually find the cure and remedy the burnout. We just keep throwing band-aids on top of it. And that's still fed by the same desire and the same mentality that says, well, if I can go the hardest and the longest with the least, I'm the best. And functionally, it actually becomes less and less and less efficient and productive. So we land in that place where we are just exhausted from the exhaustion. And that's what we call a momentum of exhaustion. That then is consciously and classically considered burnout. If we do that in that way, so the last point to bring it all together, we feel like we failed so much in that kind of dynamic. We don't tell anybody about it. We don't share it with anyone. We don't give them any insight as to what it is that got us there. We just pretend that we're okay. And then we keep digging ourselves into a deeper and deeper hole of exhaustion and shame around why am I not fill in the blanks? And why am I not able to do this like everybody else is? Because we don't realize that they're all burnt out too. And no one's talking about it.
One, this
Yes.
one of the questions was somebody saying, I'm snapping at everyone lately. My partner, my kids, my coworkers, I know I'm doing it, but I can't seem to stop what is actually happening in my body when I react that way. So Chinese medicine world, which ties in with what exhaustion is and why it's different, is burnout is closer to liver qi stagnation, which, yes, when you say it quickly does sound like liver cheese stagnation. And that is not what it is, even though it's far more entertaining. And one of the ways you can tell if you are actually tired, physically depleted, is when you stop and rest, you feel better. And you get 8 hours of sleep for once, and you wake up and you think, a wonderful thing, why have I not done this earlier? When there is qi stagnation, you get 8 hours of sleep and you wake up exhausted. And in fact, the thing that usually happens is when you go out and you start doing something, especially something you enjoy, you go belly dancing, you go for a walk with somebody you like, and you have more energy as you are expending effort, you're moving that qi stagnation. There's the image that I always see in my head. I know this is not the word, but I don't know what the word is. I call it a merry-go-round. That's not what it is. It's that thing in the park. We had one in the beach when I was growing up. It's a circle with handles that you can hang on to that go out like a pie plate, and you can spin it from the outside, and everything's well and good until some jerk kid spins it really, really, really fast, and everybody's hanging on for dear life.
You mean a merry-go-round?
Yeah, this is a merry-go-round.
Is it a merry-go-round?
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Okay. I thank you
It's not
both.
one of the It is fundamentally.
Oh, there we go. I feel vindicated.
It's not. Just the way you're describing it, it'd be like spinny terror wheel.
That's what it is. It's
There's some hidden trauma in there somewhere.
Terror on the playground.
you did not know me as a child. It was a spinning terror wheel.
You're right. There was always some a-hole that
Mhm.
spun
Right?
it really fast. I know.
It's been fascinating after these shows. My sister's always lovely and listens to the shows almost every time. And we have very different things that we remember from our childhood. And I think I was just the weird little kid that I remember the spinning terror wheel because I was always on it with no upper body strength. Thank you very much. And the jerk kid would spin and I couldn't hang on, and I'd go flying off, and I'd either hit the beach or a couple times I hit the garbage can.
Oh my God. That's
Yeah,
awful.
not fun. My sister had lots of upper body strength, and I'm sure it was traumatizing for her to watch me sail through the air. But since I got up again,
Or was it? Lots to
Question
unpack
for the
there.
ages.
so that's what liver chi stagnation is. When the jerk kid is spinning the merry-go-round really, really quickly, there's a ton of energy, as evidenced by all the kids hanging on in the center for dear life. And then every once in a while, the kid like me that flies off and hits the garbage can, when it flies off and hits the Chinese medicine heart, you get insomnia or you get crazy vivid dreams. When it flies off and hits the Chinese medicine stomach, you start getting ravenous and nothing that you eat does anything for you anymore. So there's plenty of energy there when you're exhausted. And that's the weird thing because people keep trying to rest more and more. But when they're not doing what Dana's talking about and actually feeling into what's going on there and what they need and where's the end goal, they just feel worse and worse the more they take care of themselves. Also, I'm going to write a song called Spinny Terror Wheel.
Please do.
Good to hear. Is it bad that in my neighborhood, as kids, we used to have contests about that, where you would
Oh,
spin
no.
it as fast as possible, and you won if you hung on the longest? That was kind of.
We were very different children.
Yeah.
He was one of the ones spinning it really fast, wasn't he? Truth comes out. Got real quiet there. Are you still there?
You enjoyed that feeling.
Hey, I'm flying.
I did not.
But that description is so perfect because really what we're speaking to is that really the reason why it's so important to be able to get stuck when things are jammed up, when things are not moving in the way that they're intended, we feel stuck. That stagnation, that stuckness, that stasis starts to feel literally to the nervous system and to the brain internally like it's never going to change. It's never going to shift. And what is stuck? Stuck is the opposite of flow. Okay. And a state of flow is a place where all things are moving in the manner that they should. And they're also moving in concert, they're moving together. And that's where, from a martial arts perspective, that whole idea becomes very, very alive. If the first technique that we teach people in the dojo is how to breathe, we recognize that breathing is the most important technique to ever learn. Never mind a throw, a kick, a punch, or any kind of defense. If you're not breathing, you're setting yourself up to become exhausted. And it's so evident and obvious in the dojo that when a person is in fight or flight, feeling overwhelmed, they tend to hold their breath and not breathe very well, if at all. And they exhaust themselves faster than the person that they're sparring with, right? Why? Because that stuckness is evidence of something being out of alignment. Right? It's like trying to drive a car with wheels pointing in the two front tires pointing in different directions. So you're expending all kinds of energy, right? But it's not producing any positive momentum or any positive movement. That's what makes us feel like we're holding back. That's the feeling that leads to stuckness. And that experience of stuckness becomes burnout when you hit that mental point and emotional experience of, I can't do anything to get flowing again. I'm in a place where there's nothing I can do. And I forget what it's like to feel like I have power and command and choice to move in a positive direction. So that burnout aspect becomes quiet because feeling like that is very disempowering. And feeling like that, quite frankly, particularly the way we're taught to ignore ourselves, feels really embarrassing. Right? And because it feels embarrassing, it makes us feel guilty and bad. Because it makes us feel guilty and bad, it also leaves us very, very prone to feeling ashamed of ourselves. Like, how could I be so stupid to get stuck this badly? How could I be so stupid to think that the energy I was trying to put out wasn't actually producing anything and I kept doing it anyway? Okay? And boy, as soon as we move the shame, we start to get some flow back and we start to get some feeling of possibility and that's super important. And I see this play out in the dojo all the time. Human beings, and I've said this before, I'm sure, we don't really do what we think, we do what we feel. So trying to think yourself into, oh, I can do this thing, or oh, I can fix this thing, or oh, I can, get over this thing. When you don't feel that way inside, your body doesn't feel that way, your mind doesn't feel that way, only sets you up to get more and more stuck.
Mm.
Right? Because you start thinking about it like you're in quicksand, and you think because it feels like you're doing something that if I move more and more and more, I'll actually get out of the quicksand. And all you're actually really doing is sinking yourself into it deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you get more embarrassed, and then you feel more guilty, and then you feel more shame, right? And it becomes harder and harder and harder to ask for help. It becomes harder and harder and harder to reach out to anyone because you don't want them to discover what a mistake you made. And that's a really, really big factor that I see in terms of identifying that quiet burnout that people are in and also remedying it and saying, hey, wait a second, you know what? You're not the only one that feels that way. We all have felt that way at times. Here's maybe a few thoughts that will help you understand when you're feeling that way and will help you correct that dwindling spiral and stop it, at least, never mind reverse it, but at least stop it before you get so deep and stuck in that spiral that you've lost all sense of orientation and direction and can't see up from down.
So I think I have a different answer to this than you do.
No way, really?
We agree.
That's shocking.
We agree that I'm hilarious. And um,
I'm just hilarious, sir.
yeah, we'll discuss that later. So one of the questions, which ties into what you were just saying, my oldest came to me last week and said, Mom, you don't seem happy anymore. And I didn't have an answer for her. Where do I even start explaining that? And should I? So talking about this with other people, when we're talking about that aspect of shame, it's one thing if you're talking to your partner or a friend or a counselor or one of us, it's one thing. But if you're trying to explain this to a teenager,
Mhm.
how does one do that?
I have immediate thoughts and answers, but I thought you wanted to
No, I want to hear
give
yours
some
first.
perspective. Um, well, that's in my world a pretty simple conversation that you can have in an age appropriate way with any child, teenager, or otherwise that approaches you by shifting your focus from happiness to joy and defining and
That's a good answer.
differentiating. Thank you.
I'm going to give you 16 points for that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do I get like
Wow.
These are real points. Dana devalued the whole point market years ago when my nephews and niece were young and started handing points out like they were candy on Halloween. So my 16 points actually mean something. Thank you very much.
and yet they loved me.
And I appreciate your generous soul. However,
They're still real points. I got to cash them in for cool stuff.
so we'll talk about it later.
So yeah, the idea of differentiating between happiness and joy gives you some space to recognize that really the idea that people who are pursuing happiness from an external perspective are generally and often less joyous and therefore less happy. People who are cultivating joy as an internal experience is something that they have a choice over reaching for, no matter what the external circumstances, tend to be happier people, right? Why is that? Because joy is the foundation of happiness. And joy is the foundation of happiness because it starts with us. It's about how we feel inside that sets us up to accept all different aspects of life and realize that, hey, I can be expressing deep sadness about something, but I can be doing it in a really joyous way. What does that mean in simple terms? That means that I can recognize that my sadness is direct and very valuable evidence of the value of something I've invested in and the feeling I have around that investment. So when we recognize that, hey, I was invested in something because it had a lot of meaning to me. In other words, it felt really purposeful to put my time into this project or to this person. Now my relationship with them has changed. They've gone, they've left, they've been ill, they've unfortunately maybe passed away. We don't judge the grief in the same way when it's coming from a joyous place because we recognize it as part of the celebration and recognition of the value of purpose and meaning that we had in making that investment in the first place. That's game changing and very, very powerful because it keeps us grounded and full of gratitude and gives us the opportunity to appreciate something again in the future because we've practiced putting meaning into something. We've practiced expending energy in a purposeful way that's brought value to us. When you experience that feeling, even through loss, and you can then recognize your grief as part of the evidence of how important that thing was to you. Yeah, you're sad about whatever that thing has done to make you unhappy, but you also get refortified because you realize that you can feel that feeling of purposefulness and value and investment again. And maybe it'll bring some grief again in the future, but because it creates so much joy inside of you and sharing that dynamic with others creates so much happiness around you, it feels immediately worth it to care about something that deeply again, to put energy towards something that's meaningful to you and valuable to you because you recognize that everything else is temporary. But that value and meaning that you created in participation with others lasts forever. So I would switch the topic and not, in a deflecting way. I would say, well, yeah, you know what? Maybe I am feeling a little bit unhappy right now, but I'm feeling tremendous joy that you're asking me about it. That makes me feel really cared for. That makes the good things I think about our relationship really meaningful. And man, that's worth so much to me that now I can feel like, even though I might be unhappy about this thing outside of me that's going on externally, I can look for something else to exercise my joy towards that also brings me a lot of happiness. And that's this conversation we're having right now. So I think it's great to model for kids that it's okay to be unhappy sometimes.
Mm, yeah.
And there's no shame, guilt, or embarrassment in it because it's not only about, well, I accomplished this or I didn't accomplish this, or I gained this or I lost this. It's about the process that we're going through while we participate, right? Where are we winning and learning? Well, we're winning and learning as opposed to winning and losing when we recognize that there's value in just the participation in something. Yeah, we can have goals, we can have targets, we can have things that we want to accomplish. But if we're out there and giving something our all and participating fully, right? Being honest, being open, trying our best, overcoming whatever failures we have by learning from them and then getting better and seeing ourselves get better and watching people be inspired by seeing us get better, then the overwhelm of abundance in the value and meaning that that creates is the buffer that makes us resilient to any of the things that we quote unquote fail at, any of the quote unquote mistakes we make, or any of the things that we lose, even when we've tried our best, because we're connected to the joy of trying our best.
I would say as well, uh, this idea of lowering our standards as to what trying our best looks like on the other side, because we are so used to thinking that that has to mean we succeed spectacularly well.
Mhm.
There are scooters you can rent in downtown Vancouver, and I am doing my best to work on not being as risk averse as I am because I have discovered I am very risk averse. And these are electric scooters. I don't know how fast they go, probably not very fast. In my head, they are vaguely related to the spinny, what was it? Spinny death
Terror wheel.
Spinny terror wheel.
They go pretty fast. They go like 35 kilometers an hour.
And
It's
and
faster than a person can run.
therefore, last week I rode a spinny terror wheel scooter.
Oh my God.
And it did almost result in doom, but I have very low expectations for how well I'm going to do certain physical things because I just don't have the coordination. And so the
And
fact,
yet you rode the scooter well.
well, yes and no, because the people who were helping me said slow is harder than fast, just go fast. And then I went fast, and then I was able to go quite thrilled. I was quite thrilled. And then as I was coming to a stop, and I realized the button my nephew had shown me where the start button was, but not where the stop was. So I didn't know how to use the brakes, and I was pressing the button that was saying brakes, but it wasn't doing anything. And I'm coming up to a stop sign where there are cars zipping past. So because I have very low standards for what success looks like in a good way, I think, I just jumped. I took my hand off the I was gonna say the gas, but off the power,
Mhm.
and I jumped off the scooter and ran next to it while I steered it onto the sidewalk so I wouldn't go into the cars. And even that, I still think I succeeded because I did something that my risk averse brain said, do not do that. You will die in a fiery crash. And I didn't even crash. So I do think we really could all use to lower our standards about what success is.
I thought you were super successful. You didn't crack. You didn't hurt yourself. You didn't hurt anybody else. That's success.
It is.
That is success.
So I think that is part of this because when we go back to brain science and dopamine, we don't get a dopamine hit from doing the thing until it's perfect because then it just feels like we will never accomplish anything because it will never be perfect no matter what it is. And all we get, and this is part of the quiet burnout, all we get is, well, it's done. And that's why people in quiet burnout go, oh, I finished the thing. Hooray. What's the next thing? Okay, speaking of the next thing, next question.
Yes, please. I thought you were
Okay.
just stating it as you triumphantly scooted your way to the next question.
I think we can do two more questions, but we will have to be very time aware.
Holy crap, that's flashing.
I know.
Yeah.
How is it that time already?
Well, and I will preload this with the last question is what is the very first thing I can actually do today that would make a difference? So we need to leave room for that.
Awesome.
So I will tap out at some point.
Very good.
So the precursor question, because I think this probably applies to a lot of people. I feel like the world is just too much right now. The news, the uncertainty, AI taking over jobs, everything. Is it possible to be burned out on life itself, not just work?
Yeah.
You have 3 minutes to answer.
Okay. I'm timing myself now because I could talk about that for 3 hours. Yeah, I'd say in short form, I get entirely why people feel that way.
Mm.
And part of the reason why I feel like I understand why people feel that way is because if we're coming from an externally oriented sense of safety, then forget it, pull the plug now, I'm out. This place is a zoo, makes no sense, ridiculously absurd of all kinds of chaotic variables that I don't even want to try to handle. Right? And that paradigm supports thinking that says, well, I'm only safe to the degree to which I can control external factors and variables around me. Good luck. Honestly, I mean that sincerely, and you have my blessing if that's the way. If you want it, yeah, that's if that's the way you're tackling trying to navigate through the world. And the alternative to that, that I think is driven by the perfection paradigm, right? Well, if I don't perfectly control everything outside of me and around me at all times, I'm going to fail and get crushed by the overwhelm of this existence we're in. The only other thing is then to just not try at all, right? Just not participate, not take any risk, not go out into the world, not face anything. Because, I mean, never mind going outside, like here from our little station in our office to walking to the kitchen to get a drink of water. There's so many things that could undo me as I walk. I could trip, I could fall, I could slip, I could get so many variables that could defeat me in that trek. Like if I'm only thinking that my way of accomplishing something like that is to be able to control every unknown variable that I'm going to face in that 20-meter walk, then I wouldn't even bother trying. I'd never get up from here and I'd die of thirst. However, though, if we look at life from a progress paradigm, from a proficiency paradigm, okay, and that switches the locus of control to, okay, I can't control what's
Nice use of locus.
around me. Thank you. but I can control how I respond to what's around me. In other words, I can control my choices about how I face what's around me. It brings to mind a wonderful quote that I'm going to butcher, and I can't remember exactly the source. I might have to look it up after to get it right if anyone wants to know. But basically, the what we need to face life with any chance of feeling its value and making progress isn't control, it's courage. Life expands or contracts in direct proportion to one's courage. That's the quote, if I've got it reasonably on track.
I think that's right.
Okay. What is courage? Courage is the energy that says, I know that I can confidently face the unknown. Okay. And if we recognize that and take that as even remotely true and practice with it like it's remotely true, then what it starts to do is become self-fulfilling, and it proves itself to be true, because otherwise we are trapped in a place where we say, well, the only way I can actually be successful is if I can control everything. Well, that's going to be a rough go, and you're going to get shut down and be made very timid and withdraw from life very rapidly if that's what you're relying upon to perfectly understand and know everything about everything before you enter into that space. If you actually just go out and have some courage and give yourself a chance to venture into facing something unknown, it doesn't have to be the big existential unknowns of the truth of the universe, but just something that you don't understand, but you face it anyway. Whatever you do in that space, you're going to learn from. And even if you just learn a little bit, that little bit that you learn is going to help you exponentially in facing that unknown and any other unknown with more courage.
I like that. Can I tell another story?
You super duper can.
So there's a comedian who I quite enjoy. He's an Irish comedian named David Nihil. I don't know how to say his last name. And I heard a little bit of his on the Irish grapefruit ladies. Have you heard of this?
I don't know, but I want to now.
It's very, very cool. So some women in Ireland decided they weren't going to sell grapefruit anymore because their grapefruit came from South Africa, and this was during apartheid in South
I
Africa.
remember this story.
Yeah. So they started striking against South African produce, and in particular, they were known as the Irish grapefruit ladies because that was the fruit of choice, I guess, from South Africa. And if there is ever any evidence that if you do something that matters to you, that you care about, whether or not it makes sense, it's the Irish grapefruit ladies, because half a dozen, 12 women, whatever it was, striking about grapefruit in Ireland, that impacting apartheid in South Africa, pretty slim to none chances. But it mattered to them, so they kept doing it. And then they started getting some news. And then this gentleman showed up and decided to strike with them. And his name was Nimrod, which is a very unique name. And
Biblical name.
very biblical name. And because of this, and he was a Black man who came to Ireland and was striking with them. And so that garnered a bit of attention on the news. And because it got attention on the news, Desmond Tutu, on the way to a Nobel Peace Prize that he was getting, stopped in Ireland to talk to them. And that got a ton of news coverage. And then he invited them to South Africa, where they weren't allowed in, which got a ton of news coverage.
Wow.
And eventually, Nelson Mandela reported that them striking in a way that they gained nothing from other than caring for something so deeply was one of the things that kept him going while he was in prison.
Wow.
And it turns out, in fact, that the gentleman Nimrod was actually in prison with Nelson Mandela. And so he went hearing of this because he knew it would shine a light, but he didn't tell them that's who he was. He was just some dude striking with them, walking the picket line with them. So this idea that if you are passionate about something, no matter how small or weird or out of left field it is, getting that sense of purpose back, the repercussions of that are astounding to me. And also, he's a funny guy, and it's a funny story when he tells it. It's not a funny story when I tell it, because I can't make some of those jokes. But okay, we have 3 minutes. Last question.
Yes.
Ready? What is the very first thing I can actually do today that would make a difference?
Honor how you feel and act on it.
That is not 3 minutes.
That's my record.
Do you care to expand on that, or are you?
Yeah, because honoring how you feel means you're listening to yourself, and in listening to yourself, you get more confident in being able to act upon what it is that you're feeling because you actually understand it better. And when you understand yourself better, you have an easier time of expressing yourself and taking action in the world that's clear and full of your own initiative. In other words, you're not waiting for people to tell you how to move something forward. And funny enough, when you take that kind of initiative and people see the courage in it because you're stepping into an unknown space, they're actually much more prone to support you if they recognize the value of that courage, which gets easier and easier to do the more and more they see it, right? Because courage is something that is hard to deny the inspiration of. And something that's hard to deny the inspiration of is very easy to respect. So you don't necessarily even have to agree with the person in anything that they're doing while they utilize courage to face a situation that's unknown to them. And that space can always bring value.
That's a very good answer. I approve.
Thank you very much. Jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Mhm.
I think,
So, I have a question before you wrap up.
Sure.
yeah.
Is why the heck is this so prevalent right now?
Mm. I have
Got another hour?
Well, I have time. Don't worry. But this is important because I don't get it. Why the hell are so many of us going through this right now?
I think part of it is morphic fields. There's a shared field of information, and I could talk for an hour about that. It's very cool science. We can talk about it another day, but we do as humans share information. So once something, it's like the 100 monkey theory that one monkey started washing whatever coconuts, I don't know, in water, and at the point where 100 monkeys did, monkeys on other islands started washing
Yes.
their food. Now, that actually has not been proven, but that concept certainly has a lot of validity that has been proven. So I think some of it is a morphic field because I think we have all been pushing so hard for so long that when people get upset about certain current events or upset about, AI is going to take over the world or whatever it is, they give themselves permission to finally feel what they've been feeling for so long, but now it's okay to talk about it. So I think even acknowledging that is forward momentum. What's your
Yes.
answer?
I agree.
Mine's pretty simple, and we can build on it next time. I think a large part of what's creating that, if I'm understanding correctly, what you're proposing, Nicole, is that discouraged people are easier to control.
Hmm.
Right?
So people who are distanced from their courage, disconnected from their courage, are more pliable and easier to control. I do think that there's and throughout the dynamics of human history, I don't think this is particularly unique to our time right now, but it is certainly consistent and in alignment with other actions and entities that have decided that a discouraged people are a docile people. Um, so there are some things I think that are deliberately being put forward to discourage us, keep us distanced and disconnected from our courage. Because if we are connected to our courage, our standards rise as our courage rises,
Yep.
and we will not be as compliant with things that are, never mind unlawful, because laws are made by humans, but unethical.
Yeah.
Because I think all of us as human beings are born with a pretty clear sense of what ethical behavior is. And cultures vary and have different interpretations of that. But I think that human beings can all agree on some aspect that there are certain things that are just wrong. And if we have enough of us that are not distanced from our courage to stand up and say, yeah, I don't care about the politics, I don't care about the law, I don't care about the cultural mores more than I care about the ethical treatment of my fellow human being, well, then we get pretty hard to stop.
Well, even the small things, if you do not know about red lipstick, it is such a fabulous historical thing.
That's my story.
10-second version during World War II, Hitler didn't like red lipstick. So people who couldn't do anything about what was going on in that country because they were in North America women started wearing bright red lipstick. And in fact, one of the big companies came out with a very specific color of red lipstick and handed it out at peace marches and things like that. And it started to exemplify, even if I can't do anything else, I am letting everyone know where I stand and what I believe in and what means something to me. And you could recognize other people. So women would see other women wearing the same color of red lipstick and go, right, it's not just me. There's more of us. And since then, we'll talk about that next time too, because the history of red lipstick is a history of standing up for what you believe in, as quietly as you might sometimes need to.
Wow.
Right? Next
There
time,
you
red
go.
lipstick.
Yeah, to be continued. Epic.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
As always. And having said that, yeah, shameless self promotion.
I think next week we'll talk about the dojo,
Mm.
but this week is just dropping it into people's ears. We are very close to being done a new set of audios on cravings, whether that is craving the cigarettes you know you shouldn't have, or craving dating the person that really was terrible for you, or doom scrolling on your phone at night.
Mhm.
These are all tied up in the Cravings audios. I'm so in love with them. They're making me so happy, and they should be out soon. So the old Cravings audios there's 3 of them on our website for free in the audio section, and they will be disappearing when the new ones come out. So go listen to the old ones, which are pretty good, but the new ones are going to be awesome, and they will replace the old ones. So listen to them now while you got a chance.
Woot woot.
Woot woot.
You can reach us at the digitaldojo.net. That's the digitaldojo.net for all kinds of hopefully fascinating discussions around all of these topics. You just made me realize, too, that one of the cravings I like to help people overcome and overcome it myself is the craving for the esteem of others.
That's a good one.
That's a topic that we can get into, right?
Mm.
Because that's the substitute that we're often, taught to pursue as compared to the respect and validation of our own self-worth. So we've got lots of resources at the digitaldojo.net. We've got all of our social media contacts and platforms there, from Instagram to Pinterest, YouTube, and Facebook. And we are offering a 50% discount on any of our paid programs to all members of the News for the Soul audience. If you should so choose to engage in anything that we've got to offer, you will get a 50% discount on any price point for the balance of 2026, because this is the year, what do? We fix in 26.
We do indeed. Woo! And so glad you're here helping us do exactly that. The
Thrilled
Digital
to be.
Dojo, they're all linked up at newsforthesoul.com. I love these deep dives, and today was epic as always. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Thank you so much.